So in understanding what the living system is in the book, we sort of, after belonging, one of the things I'm really adamant about in the book is I'm saying that we just want to know, right? Just tell me. Like, I don't want to do any of this. Just tell me what the answer is and let me move on. And I really point out at the start of the book, it's really tempting to just go to the living system section, read through and go, yep, great, that's what it is. I've locked it in and I'm walking away, right? Like, but you're going to miss understanding the processes and what it takes to truly understand it and get to that space. The role belonging has in that space. So understanding the living system, it goes into talking about there is natural law to life and her creations. This natural law becomes creation as a living system that eternally flows as one within all things. The living system is the form of the natural laws of life. So everything that is in formation here is a form of the natural laws, a form of her creation, her expression as an energy. It is a universal system. The foundations, the ethics and values that the natural laws of the living system exist as is in fact the philosophy of life herself. To return to this natural philosophy brings us towards an inspiring alternative held by those foundations. And it gives us a way to be able to say, there is something else happening here. We don't actually have to build another system to step out of where we are. There is one that is running, that is life, and that's regardless of how many systems we create, it's going to keep going because that's the thing that's keeping everything going and alive, right? And the more humankind thinks that it can build things on top of that, it's not only denying that that's there, but it's fooling itself to think that it's going to ever exist without having that component. And so we don't need to build something. We need to return to what already is there and what actually flourishes us and keeps us alive and sustains us constantly, from the air we breathe to everything that's underneath us, right? All of that is provided by this living system that is perfectly set up to have every part of creation exist, survive, thrive, have abundance within it. I mean, if you think about it, it's extraordinary. We worry about having 8 billion people on the planet. I mean, life itself has a gazillion children running around on here that in one moment at every second is nurtured by breath, by food, by water, by all these other things. That's, I mean, if you're talking about mothering, you know, she's got it down. She's doing all things at once, right? Like, so really understanding all things as one. Doesn't matter what it is that we are stepping into, allowing ourselves to understand that we have no separation to animal, to plant, to bacteria, to anything, that all of these pieces are a part of not only who we are, but what we are. And all of them are examples of the same system that's functioning, the same way, the same flow, the same life force. And literally it is a micro within a macro constantly. The same function is happening within our cells as it is within our being, as it is within our sitting here in this room together. The same cycle and function of life is happening in relationality, in connection. It just keeps repeating itself on all these different levels. So you have these beautiful micro, macro, holonic, pieces of threads constantly weaving and repeating itself over and over because it's unending in its life force, right? It's pretty much proven its success, right? So this really quickly just goes into talking about these are the components of the living system, and at all times these things are what are happening at once. There's relationship happening, there's community happening, there's culture happening, there's patterns that we can witness, there's symbiosis happening, and it's at all times a part of a whole system. It's all functioning as one. What's on the inside are the actions that it's doing. And the thing is that it's really easy for us to think that this is what it looks like, but in fact it's actually that. because constantly everything is relating to everything else and impacting everything else. And so that flow isn't just happening in a, clockwork styled manner of, this relationship is going to only build community. Well, it's not. The relationship is also going over to the patterns, and the patterns is also going over to the whole systems. They are all constantly weaving and touching and threading through each other through that capacity of relationship to make sure it stays as a whole system. So it's using all the connections of community and its desire to observe patterns and its desire to use these symbiotic, patterns and capacities to constantly relate and build this whole system. So it really just goes on talking about explaining each of those, and these are all sort of in the book and everything else, but it's explained out, how it's constantly trying to return into this wholeness and work as one, and how it is doing that as a constant flow. Now, what's really interesting is that when you understand that, this is where, again, we come from that human-centric ego-eco stance, that our integration moves us from a human-centric stance to our place amongst life. So we're bringing ourselves back in. It allows deep unity from soil to soul to solar. It reveals the self-perpetuating system that is life to be visible as the same continuous flow within all things. So it goes into explaining how from soil to plants to people that system is the same. And then it goes into discussing how from plants to people and beyond it's the same. Within the solar system, all of it is resonating from up, below. It's all working as one, as a constant flow and thread. And that is, explained sort of deeper in there. We talk about the elements, so making sure that we understand that all of these different pieces and parcels are a part of what we are working with as one. And it's so easy for us to forget the very basic component of life as the elements and how they then shape and form into all other things. So really understanding deeply what each of these elements have and what each capacity they have, and finding them and discovering them within our belonging, right? So then we're learning all of this and bringing it back into our space of how's this helping me relationally, and what is that capacity within the land? How is it showing the wind? Where does the sun fall? Where does the moon rise? Where does it set? How do I best make use of all of these different elements as it sits relevant to my piece of land where I'm choosing to belong? And goes on to talk about how we ingest life of the elements through all forms, through plants, through soil, through breath, animals, conversation. We are constantly absorbing elements. They are the sustenance of life in all these different forms, created through beginnings and endings. They are what we're doing. And then, of course, we come into really talking about, and this is where it gets, into saying that, every animal is as much a part of us, and we need to have that. And I know that for a bit there was that question, and then around the role that livestock plays in regenerative work and permaculture work and restorative work and all that sort of thing. But from a living system perspective, it's not even a question, because there's no difference between a above ground, what you would call livestock, of having a cow in your paddock, as it is to the livestock that's under the ground, right? The worms, the bacteria, the beetles, everything that's existing under the ground. So live, anything that's alive from, it shouldn't even really be called stock, but from a language perspective, what is above and below of animals and other creation and other kin that are working with us, that are a part of it. And one of the things I always say to people is, from when we get into the unraveling sort of section around the mental health side, if you are ever wondering around that question of self-worth, what is my worth here? Am I worthy? What is my value? The fact that you are alive is proof of your worth. Mm-hmm. Life does not make mistakes. Life does not create on a random scenario. Life creates with purpose, and if you are here, you have value and worth in who you are and what you have to offer. You might not be clear on that, but there is value in who you are and the expression that you are of life and how you offer that up as an experience to life. And so if we take that through even to the smallest little creature, right, there's value. It's created for a reason. There's something in that space for that little creature to do. And remembering the challenges also hold a solution. So what is life offering in both of those sides? If there's too many ants, you know, how do we work with that? If there's too many of something else, what's happening? What's the imbalance? Life is constantly wanting to bring about harmony. I don't like the word balance because it makes it look like we're meant to sit like this, right? And we're just not that. But there is harmony in this, right? Because we're in flow and it's fluid, and sometimes we're here, but we'll always come here and this sort of thing. When that is just not possible, because it's not how life functions as this linear, one driven line of always being in this perfect state. Perfect is this, you know, perfect is wobbly. Perfect is chaos and then creation. Perfect is allowing that constant flow. A river is not dead straight, right? It picks up the minerals it needs, it flows where it can, all those sorts of things is what, you know, we really see about how life sort of functions. Seasons, obviously, we go into seasons and talk about how important they are and observing the changes of them. And then we go into saying that finally, arguably, the most important quality of the living system is that it is sacred. It is a very deeply sacred system. It is the sacred thread of life that exists within all things as one energy. It expresses in all forms at once. At no time are we truly separated or individual, for we are at all times one with all things. We each are unique aspects of the whole, and this uniqueness is the quality that life calls for it to build its symphony. That we and all things exist is proof of our worth and value, and we are tasked with stillness to allow our uniqueness to be found and offered in service to the living system. Find what's within you. There is something within you that life is asking for you to play. But most times I would suggest that what you haven't found is where you belong to offer that. Because once you find that space of belonging, you know how to give yourself to it. You know how to deeply connect with it. It almost becomes crazy how much you can click into sync when you find that space of belonging and everything. You know, you just fall in instead of having to fit in, shape myself to get in. I just fall in because it's there and it's perfect.